Have you ever wondered whether some people will put on the earth to frustrate you? I think we sometimes wonder that. With the amount of division and polarization in our country now, conflict has a way of straining relationships. You want to know how to make an enemy? It's really quite easy. All you have to have is one significant, early negative experience, and you have an enemy. I want to take you back. I'm a psychologist by training, and I graduated, and I decided it was the best time to start my own company since I was already used to poverty. After about 3 or 4 years, I was speaking to get clients. I had built a reputation as a business speaker. I'd also written a book. I'd done some consulting. I was called into a construction company, and I was asked to do a 2-day weekend retreat. 8 executives. 7 of them were there at the start, and I welcomed them. I had a flip chart, and I was writing down issues that I felt they wanted to work on, and then the 8th executive walked in. He didn't look happy to be there. I welcomed him, and then I said, we've got a list here of some of the things that people want to focus on, and I just want to ask you, do you have anything you would like to add to that list? He looked at me and he said, I don't anticipate I'm going to learn anything from you. You're too young to know anything. What's more, I've studied with the best, and this is an entire waste of a weekend. Being a psychologist, I sensed he didn't like me. I had nowhere to hide. They were wondering what I was going to say, and so was I. There was a knot in my stomach. I looked at him, and I don't know where it came from. I just said, I'm as old as I can be for my age. But this isn't my weekend, it's yours. I'm here to be a facilitator, which means I need the input of all the people. And in fact, with a background, it sounds like you have. I hope you listen long enough to what we're talking about so you can share some of your wisdom. I looked him in the eyes, turned to the other people, went back to my material, and started to hyperventilate. I had to spend 2 days with that man. And I knew he could wreck the entire experience. I was struggling in my mind how to handle it. Religious principles, love thy neighbor as thyself, love your enemies. He was making it hard to do that. I was thinking also, I had to get in a little bit of a battle with him. I'm pretty good on my feet, and I can handle it. And then I remembered the words of Confucius. Before you embark on a journey of revenge, dig 2 graves. It's costly to attempt to get even. As a psychologist, I knew people who'd been wronged at some point in their lives, and they'd talk about it, and I realized some of them would invest hours, days, weeks, years getting even, and the only person that was hurt was themselves. It costs us to get even. And then there's the opposite side of this. If you start getting even with them, they create a cycle of getting even back. I was in New York at Kennedy Airport. I did a program for IBM. I was coming back to Los Angeles. In 1980, it was the air traffic controller strike. You folks, many of you weren't even born at that time, but it was a tough time to travel. Long lines, delayed flights, missed flights. The guy in front of me was giving this checker an obnoxious time. I said nothing at the time because he was also quite large. But as soon as the guy left, I turned to the checker and I said, my gosh, do people talk that way to you often? He says, oh yeah. You get used to it here in New York. I laughed. I said, well, I don't think I get used to it. And then he said, don't worry, bud. After all, the customer's always right. I sensed he didn't mean that. So I said to him, I said, well, I don't think he's right in this case. He looked at me and he said, don't worry, I've already gotten even. He's going to Chicago, but his bags are going to Japan. True story. He had taken off his identifiable tags, put on the tag for Tokyo, and sent it down. I've never been more friendly to an individual in my entire life. We still correspond. We're good friends. Actually, I tipped him well, looked back to make sure he put my bags down appropriately. And then I thought about it. How many of you agree? If a guy's mean to you, it feels like you ought to somehow get even, and yet by the time that guy gets to Chicago and that bag isn't there, he goes to the people to report, I fly 300,000 miles with your airline every year. I don't know the name of the guy who put the bags. I was not nice to him, but that is no way to treat me. I want his job. You create cycles of getting even. And that doesn't work. Winners never always win because losers never forget. You see, they're looking to get even with you. So how do we make an enemy? It's really quite easy. All you really need is a significant negative experience, actual or anticipated. We've described a couple ways that are actual. How about anticipated? How many of you receive warnings about people? Oh, you got to work with them? Well, I don't want to say anything. Push me. Oh, don't worry, you'll find out yourself. How many of you agree if somebody negatively gossips about somebody, you don't even have to meet them? You're borrowing that person's experience and it's coloring your own. Any bias you have, we all have them. It's easy to see bias in other people. It's hard to know your own. It could be race, it could be gender, it could be the job or position that you have, it could be the school you go to. It could be age. You see, you're all young, and young people, well, we know they haven't matured yet. There'll come a time when we should listen to you, but at this point, it's kind of premature. If that is my perception of a young person, do you think I'd have trouble really learning anything from you? Of course. And how about too old? How many of you have that bias? I mean, you people are old. I mean, I've read research. Neurons are dying every day. By the time you get to 60, you got a few random sparks trying to connect. If that's my perception of a parent, of a teacher, or anybody old, then I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to learn. You see, it's easy to have a negative experience because that brings us to the second. I love Charlie Brown because there's a little bit of Charlie Brown in all of us. No problem is too big or so complicated that it cannot be run away from. Most of us avoid our difficult people. Would you not agree? If you go into a room and there's a difficult person there, you don't go, oh, there you are. You sit with the people you enjoy. How many of you came in this morning and you immediately, oh, there you are. Oh. You sit with your friends. You never sit with your enemies. If they're in there, you wait till somebody else takes that seat. You see, the natural tendency is we distance our difficult people. We avoid them. We establish what I affectionately call Mafia Pacts. You don't bother me too much, I don't bother you. The only time we deal with them is when we have to, which is over conflict or I've got to make a request. Relationships are a little bit like a deposit system. Go to your bank and ask them if you can do this. Would you mind if we just made withdrawals? I don't think so. You've got to make deposits. In fact, research shows that for every negative experience, you need to have 4 positive. A 4-to-1 positive to negative contact ratio. Who are the only people you get 4-to-1 with? People you like. You laugh with them, you play with them, you eat with them, you sit next to them in meetings, and you have all these conversations. You have a great relationship, but with enemies, all you have is distance. Then all you have to add is a dash of selective scanning. You look for evidence to support your initial perception that they're negative. How could it be that a politician could have 2 people in an audience and one person come up and go out of the room and say, liar, liar. And the other person go out of the room and say, I love it, I've got to vote for that person. It's the baggage they bring in to that conversation. It's what they're looking for. How can I prove them wrong or how can I prove them right? But how do you turn this around? I go to one of my favorite leaders of all time, a man who led during a time of tremendous crisis, and that was Abraham Lincoln. I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. There's only one reference to that quote. I don't even know if it's really accurate. It was in a diary of a politician at that time. There were 3 politicians talking about a person negatively, and Lincoln came on the conversation, and he listened for a moment and said, "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better," and left. The man made the comment in the diary, and that's the only reference to it. The interesting thing is, it is a tremendous wisdom, because instead of avoiding, it invites dialogue. First time you try and build a bridge or listen or dialogue with an enemy, what are they thinking? They're trying something. They probably listened to that TED Talk. It's phony, and I can tell it. You never trust early efforts to change a relationship. The only thing that builds trust is history. Most of us are only willing to try something. I'll try and be nice. I'll try and do some positives, but when I'm rejected, I avoid again. Decide in your life what you're going to be like as a person. I know that every person has treasure. My job is to get beyond that initial perception and make sure we have enough dialogue and experiences to turn it around. What do we do to build bridges? I mean, it's really pretty simple. Some of them are simple. If I see one of my enemies in a hallway, instead of putting my face in park and looking ahead, I look at him and I smile and I greet them. Hi. Imagine that. What is the enemy thinking? I don't know what's wrong with them, but they're being friendly. Next meeting you go to or next class that you went to, and if there's a seat next to a person you have difficulty with, sit with them. Imagine it. Go into the class and you go, there you are. And they're saying, oh my God, they're coming here. But in the 5 minutes before class starts, you get to talk about some of your common ground. You see, a salesperson will tell you, all I need is 5% common ground. You like the Rams, I like the Lambs. You got kids, I got kids. You like to ski, I like to ski. All it takes is taking 5 minutes just talking about something that's comfortable, and all of a sudden you put a deposit in the system. There are more ways. Benjamin Franklin was known for his ability to negotiate and work with a variety of groups. The best way to win someone over is your cause is to ask them to help you. You see, most of us think when we're trying to win somebody over, we'll just help them. Let me help you, let me help you, let me help you, let me help you. What are you saying to the person? You need a lot of help. The greatest compliment and bridge builder you can do is to let them help you. Know the strengths of your enemies. And if you don't know that they have any, talk to somebody who gets along with them and say, what do they do well? What are their strengths? Because if I go to you and I say, look, I made a note that you had background in this, and before I do any work on it, I wanted to get your thoughts. What are you saying to them? I respect you. Then really blow them away, positively gossip about their contribution. How many agree most gossip is negative? It doesn't have to be. When somebody says, how's it going with them? I immediately say, well, you know, they gave me input on. In fact, I couldn't have done it with them. Give them more than their share of the credit, less than their share of the blame. If that gets back to them, could you imagine the pain? Terry was talking about you. What did he say? He said you did a great job and helped him get through that, and he was really appreciative. And what else did he say? Nothing. I kind of like that guy. Find ways to let them contribute. How about a sense of humor? Laughter is the shortest distance between two people. In attributes of people we enjoy, whether it's partners, people we marry, parents, teachers, friends, humor is always in the top 3. Laughing at enemies is not helpful. Who's the safest target for your humor? Always yourself. How many of you agree on a daily basis you do plenty of things to make you laugh? Why not invite them in? Enemies love to laugh at you, but if you start it, you get to build a bridge. How about this one? We learn collaborative problem solving. In school, that's called cheating. Much of life is competition, but in life later, it's about teaming. I want the best people on my team. As a result of that, find a way to have a common cause. All you have to do is build that network, find a way, ask that person to be part of a team. If they find something that they want to work on and you share that value, work with them on that project. I know we have our differences, but I want to work with you on this. That's why in the war movies, you have a redneck from the South, you have a black from Detroit. They hate each other in boot camp, but by the time they're in a war and in the same foxhole, They're the band of brothers. Find a way to make a difference together. Final slide. Every person I work with knows something better than I. My job is to listen long enough and use it. This was on the wall of Jack Nichols. He was my first manager I reported to. Stanford Linear Accelerator in Palo Alto, California. He lived it. But that's what life is about. Find the treasure in people. Some people are prickly, and it's hard to get through that to find the treasure, but your job is to persist. Let me go back to that initial executive. You see, after that conversation, he avoided me. He didn't participate much in that first morning, but at lunch, it was a buffet. I let him go first. He grabbed his food, went to the table, and I immediately grabbed my food, and it was like Jaws music was playing in the background. This guy's mine. I sat down right next to him, and I knew he didn't want me there. But I spent all morning trying to find something I could say that was sincere. I said, "You said you'd studied with one of the best. And in all my years of training, I've never heard anybody say that. You must have respected that. Who did you study with?" He said, "Peter Drucker." And I said, "Wow, he's one of the top business thinkers." I had a chance to present with him once. He was on early. I met in the hallway, but I've never studied with him. What do you still remember from that experience? He started sharing quotes of Peter Drucker. Some of them I use to this day. I was writing down quotes on the napkin. All of a sudden, my enemy had turned to a colleague, and I was loving. We hardly ate. When we went back, I went up to him and I said, "Would you mind if I shared one of the quotes you shared from Peter Drucker, because it fits right now into what we're talking about?" And he said, "Please, go ahead." I shared his quote, and I heard him lean to the person next to him. He said, "You know, he really is pretty good. I don't need to have people love me, but I never want differences to stop us from being able to make a difference." Apply the bridge building strategies we've talked about this morning, and you may just be amazed at how many enemies turn into people you have as a friend for a lifetime. Let's end with a comment again of Abraham Lincoln. "I don't like that man. I must get to know him better. May it be so."